Hi, Jade.
Hey, Ron, good evening.
Good evening to you.
So, we're going to talk tonight about the dreaded V word, not vulnerability, but victimhood. Victim. What
I,
do you think?
I think that sounds great. That's a really hot topic. I mean, I have to just say that I have identified as a victim myself. And so it's a very sensitive topic.
Yeah. So, maybe just to start, there are people who are currently and have been victimized, no fault of their own, and it damages their ability to live peacefully. And then there's this other kind of self pitying victim. And you can be both. You can be right victimized and years later still kind of be in self pity. But is there a difference between, like, is there a not a good victim, but do you get a free pass? What are your thoughts on that? Like, if you've been victimized?
I think that's a good, I'm thinking about cultures
Mhm.
that have long, multi generational trauma. Like
Mhm.
the Jewish people, I'm Jewish, the Jewish people or indigenous people, and they have been traumatized generation after generation, and then some learned helplessness develops. And not only that, but also I think that I've read articles, especially with PTSD, with the Jewish population who've been to concentration camps, that let's say someone survived the concentration camp, they went on to have children, that all the severe trauma that they had, it impacted their DNA. And then when they had children, their children's DNA was impacted, but also the whole nurturing piece. Like they parented from their role as a victim. And I think that also happens in in indigenous cultures, like they have a lot of learned helplessness because they were mistreated and violated in so many different ways and were helpless.
It's a
So
great.
so I think that's a good, I mean, I don't know. I mean, do they get a pass? I mean, how it's screwed up though.
Yeah, what do you think about this? I'm pretty good at times. One of the ways, if the title of our podcast, the goal is finding serenity.
Hmm.
So, like, maybe like a boundary I could set with myself is you get to stop calling other people victims and whining about their victimhood. And when you can identify yourself, JD, as a victim and your own self pity, like what's really have you been victimized and then what's self pity, that's okay. Like it's like, I don't know enough, the whole judgment of others, what's going on. If there's some DNA piece, right? I've heard that. I've read that study. Like, that is fucked. It
Messed
is
up.
bad.
So screwed up.
And
Trauma's bad.
it is. And I think part of what, we talked a little bit about narcissistic primitive wounds before, all these things. And, if I'm trying to find serenity, I have to realize there are true victims out there. There are true narcissists. How do I interact with them in a compassionate way or a neutral way rather than me getting spun out about all the victims and self-pitying people in the world?
But it's also true, like a person that has a mentality that they believe that they are a victim and they go through life and every interaction that they have, they view themselves as a victim. It doesn't lead to serenity,
Right.
you know,
And that
and that's problematic.
if I want serenity, I have to identify my victimhood, own and honor what's happened to me that was not my fault, realize it's going to show up in ways, and do my best to stay aware of it. And that's hard work.
I think that that's a really good I think that's an excellent strategy, honoring it, but trying to be mindful about it so that, when you are whining and complaining and also very likely distorting your human interactions from a victim perspective, that you can change. You might screw up some human interactions, but you might, by being aware, you might start having better human interactions.
Yeah. And I think, like, just there's so many ways that we can be, you know, I don't think it's a conscious choice for a long time to be like, identify as this is what's happened to me. But if the story doesn't change, I will never find serenity. And if the story changing needs to be other people or the world needs to change, I'm doomed. And if the story needs to involve building a time machine, that's, I think, what people who've been victimized, the one thing they want, the one thing they can't have, which is for it never to have happened.
Yeah, it's really amazing. I mean, like, it really is that is I administer these trauma surveys, and a lot of the questions are, about coping with the fact that it happened, but also it asks questions like, "Do you wish that it didn't happen?" And that's
Yeah. And I see these people, some of them, and I'm starting to see the wisdom of it instead of dismissing it. To talk about, they'll be like, I'm grateful my mother was bipolar and invalidated. Grateful my husband died of cancer. And I'm like, the fuck, that's such bullshit. But it's not because they're doing this deep inner work that says, I have to make nice with the past. And a lot of things I found with change are the way I view the world. And I've started recently saying out loud, thanking my higher power for my challenges specifically. And by doing that, it makes me remember this kind of dumb wisdom that's actually pretty cool, which says, so far, JD, your record of getting through everything is 100%, and it gives a little perspective when I say them out loud, the ugly stuff that I don't really like to share with anyone but my sponsor and my higher power. It's like the more I say it out loud, the more I realize, what? Other people are going through this and crap 5,000 times worse. I have faith. I have a community. I have multiple people I can get help that can help me. And so I really think that healing, whether it's from true victimhood, and you might need some specific long term trauma therapy, you might need EMDR, you might need all sorts of stuff, some sort of depression medication. There's a million tools, but
yeah.
there's not one tool alone that will allow me. There's no pill or even therapy, I don't think, that'll allow me to do anything other than maybe identify some stuff. But until I experience what getting out of victimhood means and keep doing that, it's not it. There's just, I want to bypass it. I just don't want to feel it. That's one, it's an alternative. It's a solution, But yeah, it's like, huh. And it's just, I really think, I don't know if the term's ego weak, but most humans are, right? We're defensive, blaming, kind of fear based, and all without knowing it, because we're all right about everything.
And sabotaging our success.
Exactly. And I think
Our
I,
mentality, like if you have a victim mentality, it's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy, and you're going to end up being a victim and victimized.
no, and I really think, I call it conditioned hopelessness. People with addiction have it, people with trauma have it, people who just don't launch, people that have, you get in two relationships and they both die. You're going to be like, I'm never getting close to anybody. Or the love of your life leaves. You're like, I'm not going to get hurt anymore. And all those are fine. But, some of those things we read in the meetings about finding happiness, serenity, contentment. It sounds to the self-absorbed, traumatized, terrorized, unaware person like that is a bunch of happy horseshit. They used to say things about self-love, and these ding-dongs I was in treatment with, just like me, would be like, well, I can't help anyone, love anyone till I love myself. And I'm like, you guys don't get it. These are carrots. I've been to a dog track one time. I felt guilty about going. I wanted to drink and get well, when they, it's just me and a bunch of other alcoholics. Stupid, awfully treated dogs running, and around the PA, the announcer, whenever the race starts, like the gates open, excuse me, and the announcer's like, and Swifty's on a roll, and Swifty is this mechanical rabbit they're chasing. That's what I thought that self-love was. Let's just dangle this so you can stay in treatment, go to stupid meetings with this idea one day you'll love yourself. And thank God I was wrong, But it's been kind of a messy, non-linear, hurt me, hurt other people, full of joy, heartache, pain, ups and downs, which the more internal work I do and talk to people, I realize is just life, So I don't know. It's
It is
possible, but that disbelief. There's disbelief that I could change, right? So the last
it's disbelief that you can change, but I think that I really believe in my heart of hearts that when you have awareness and let's say you become aware that you have this problem where you identify with the victim, you start becoming aware. It's very empowering because then you realize, like how you are distorting your perception. And that does, you talked about the primitive narcissistic wound again. But being a victim is a primitive narcissistic wound. And if you view the world from that wound, then that's how you're going to view your relationships. And then, but once you say, oh my gosh, or someone points it out to you, like if you have a sponsor or you start reading literature and you realize it, and then you start having human interactions and you can see it. You can see that you are viewing the world from that perspective, then you can change it. I mean, I'm trying to think, what do you have a good, easy example that's really that we could talk about this about how viewing the world from a victim mentality would cause you to engage in a human relationship from that perspective and then cause that relationship to
Yeah, I think that let's see. I think that most humans without knowing it do this combination of arrogance and shame. And I'm in a relationship.
that's a good combination, arrogance and shame.
I'm in a relationship and it's going swimmingly like most of them do for about 90 days. And then, I start to show up who I really am. And so does she, and wise people will tell me, you're just getting to know each other. They're showing their true colors. And that doesn't mean what most people think. Most people think that's a negative thing. Like, now I see who you really are, a piece of garbage. They're showing you like what they mean is like, no, this is what happens when they need space. This is what happens when they're stressed. This is what happens when they like reveal to you that they like have had an invalidating mother, And it's just like all these things. This is how you
Intimacy.
What's that?
Yeah, intimacy.
Yeah, intimacy. Talk about bad words, man. My mom was like, that's a lot, but it's kind of real and cool. I think it's good, That's the worst word, intimacy. How dare you? My virgin product. I don't know. But yeah, so anyway, we argued. And I got a long, bad relationship history. And so I go to it as at first we argue and I raise my voice, and then down the road, she's like, that scares me, And then I have some compassion because I talk to people. They're like, JD, she had an invalidating mother. She's just telling you her needs. And I'm like, well, I was raised, I wasn't hit, but it was like volume and foul language. And then I do what I'm supposed to do, the things I've been taught in recovery. Pray for the removal of yelling, pray to keep quiet and listen to understand rather than react. And then I do that for a while. And then we argue some more. And then I make it more like, well, we have the same stupid patterns. Why do we, And then I determine, because of my history, because of what's going on currently, I suck at relationships. I always have. I always will. Yeah, it's fucking funny. You can't see this if you're listening, but she's cracking up.
Really, it is so awful.
And then, like, I'm better today at being like, look, I'm not good at relationships. Part of this is I don't have time and energy to do it. Part of it is selfish. Part of it is I got this thing where if we're arguing, I think it's bad rather than this is what normal people do. And so then I'm like, no to relationships. Does that make any sense? Is just I kind of judge, jury, and execute myself and others without being able to see things as just kind of normal and people in love kind of work through stuff. I don't know.
I mean, I can totally identify. I'm on I can totally identify. I mean, I'm thinking about, a situation also that, someone who's really close to me had, like, a horrible mother. Like, the mother was very rejecting, terrible, shaming, and so, this is an older person, spent their whole lives with all this shame, right, and over-identifying with the victim, but that person entered into human relationships with a perspective of being rejected and shamed, and I'm talking about even simple human interactions, like going to a restaurant and the waiter viewing the waiter as a perpetrator, right? And because and serving bad food, attacking when that isn't true, it's not true. But that person has a bad experience because of their own freaking mentality of being a victim. Go ahead, JD. I'm sorry.
No, that's exactly it. Little tiny interactions.
Little tiny.
And what I like about both like 12-step recovery and some therapists that either don't understand or don't like 12 steps. You don't have to. It's not the only path to recovery, but like they nail it. And it's not a personal attack or shaming. The problem, you talk about it all the time, disease of self.
Totally.
option, and that's it. The waiter, and again, if I have whatever the word is, actuated, activated, if I like have any sense of self and a waiter gives me a bad look, like I might like out of like trauma response, like yell at him, or most likely just laugh it off and say he's having a bad day right after that and apologize for yelling. Maybe complain to the owner of the restaurant, but I'd be like, I would know. It's like, and they say these simple things like, oh, other people, whatever they think of me is none of my business. Do you know how hard that is to do? But if you don't do it, that's it. You're taking a glance from a waiter, and it's not the waiter. It's something that happened long back before, but it's just, then you keep piling up this evidence that, like you said, is self-fulfilling. The
You have
world
to you have to go back to the family of origin. When you get triggered and you have a screwed up distortion, you have to bring it back to that family of origin or you cannot get through it. I mean, I don't think so. I don't think that's true. And can I just give you another example?
Please.
Okay. So, um, let's say a person feels like you don't make them a priority. Okay. And so, and you do something, like stupid. You do something stupid like they say, "Can you help me move this trunk?" And you're like, "Okay, I can do it. Let me just finish what I'm doing, and then I'll come help you." And then they say, "You're not making me a priority. You would stop what you're doing and come help me." But if you grew up and around the family disease of alcoholism, you probably were not a priority. It's very hard for an alcoholic parent to make a child a priority. And so you may always feel like if someone even though the person may make you a priority, you may not sense that they're making you a priority because of your perception that you are not a priority.
Right. That's nails it. And that's where I think the whole finding serenity is like, there's this wisdom. I believe it's true, which in people I would have and still could misunderstand it because I don't see nuance. I'm a black and white thinker. And it's like, you're responsible for your own triggers, JD. And right away, I'm like, blah, 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 blah. And I mean, if someone came up and they knew all about whatever invalidating trauma or whatever it is I'd had and like started like teasing me, that's a little different. That's not what it's talking about. If I want serenity, I'm aware of what you say, my family of origin issues. I'm aware of my reactivity. I'm not going to not be reactive. I'm just going to be quicker aware, like, oh, whoa, 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 it's not the waiter.
Yeah, right.
But to do that, and this goes some of the work I've done, and I might have shared about this a little bit just briefly, but is once you become aware, which is very hard to do, involve like journaling, sharing with someone everything you're pissed about, all the lies you've told. Like it's like hard work. Then you identify like, oh, maybe one of the things holding me back from finding serenity is my reactivity and my self-pity. And so I either journal about it, pray about it daily, set an intention, mantras, post-it notes. And then I'm like, holy shit, ever since I've been praying about it, journaling about it, writing sticky notes and setting intention, it keeps fucking happening more and more and more. All it takes is going to someone who is doing or has done some of this work and telling them that, and they laugh. And they're like, it's not happening more, ding dong. You're just more aware of it. And I'm like, but it's like, it's hard to imagine a world where I'm aware I'm triggered, go through the ick and the back of the brain crap, get some serenity, and some perspective. Like that is hard work, It's easy to sit back and wait for the world to change, And, I always joke around about this speech I heard Nelson Mandela gave. Like part of it is like, who dare you not to shine? It was some poem written for him, but I believe they nailed it. That's what everybody's afraid of is just like, I don't think people can see the possibility of change, this conditioned hopelessness. And that's one of the things that I prefer about some of the recovery stuff I do is it doesn't take, throw a rock in a 12-step meeting or a NA convention and could hit 100 people who have changed dramatically,
Yeah, sure.
Can I tell you a quick story about that?
Yeah, I want to hear. Yeah.
So I'm at this Narcotics Anonymous convention years ago, and 2,000 addicts in this ballroom listening to one of the main speakers, and she's from the East Coast. And, she's like, she's got the story, heroin, crack, alcohol, selling her body, talking about her stroll where she'd sell her body and do dope and get drunk at this, nasty part of Boston or whatever. And she's like funnier than shit. She's unhinged. She cusses and she starts like repeating herself with some pretty horrific like things she did as a sex worker. And like, at first it's funny. Then I'm like, does she have a head injury? Like, what's the, you kind of made your point, you know? And then she stops and laughs and she's like, I just wanted to see what the sign language interpreters, like how they use what they do when I'm saying I did this, this, and this. But anyway, somehow millions of detoxes, millions of overdoses, millions of treatments. She got better. And this woman has been every kind of victimized you can imagine. And she now owns the building where she used to turn tricks and has overdosed before in the foyer of it
Wow.
as a lawyer.
That's freaking awesome.
And there's other people that might
Bill, that's
get a job or get a relationship. It's like it doesn't have to be that dramatic, but it's possible. But the hard work, I think, really is looking inward. And I don't know. I don't know who can do it on their own. It's more of an intellectual exercise. All the self-help, all the journaling, all the therapy is great. But until you get some people you trust to talk about who maybe been through it before, going through it, it's just ideas.
I think so too. Is it really talking about it? I mean, that's how it's no longer a secret that keeps its power over you.
Yeah. And you're like, you could talk about alcoholic marriage. I mean, there's a huge bad things happen to you, right? And part of the healing process that I've seen you do is you talk about what they did to you and what they wouldn't do and what you did. Like, oh, I was just today. And then, like, slowly it's more like, okay, what are the Rhonda issues? And again, those things hurt to identify. Because on the surface, it's the stupid alcoholic who's unreliable. That's the problem. If they just weren't doing that, I'd be okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's one of the beautiful things about Al-Anon is that, you learn to no longer blame the alcoholic and you look at yourself. And that's very empowering.
Yeah. The one thing I'll say that it's a huge sign of progress with victimhood, really with anything, for me, and that I can see and I like to point out when people do it, is when I'm able to laugh at myself in a non-shameful way, but like, my God, I'm a pretty smart guy and 45 years old, and that never entered my mind. Wow. And just to be able to laugh at some of it, to just laugh and say I'm human or laugh and say, wow, I'm better now. Wow, I'm not alone, and I can't figure any of those things out unless I'm around other people. Most of this stuff is so freaking private. And so that's again why I like the whole self-absorption is the problem. It's not like attack. It's just identification. But I'm the last person to know I'm self-absorbed, right?
Yeah.
It's the waiter's fault. It's mom's fault. It's colonialism's fault. It is and is. And what do you want to do about it, JD? Right?
Yeah. That's awesome. I think we should end with that. That's awesome.
Cool.
Be
Thanks
beautiful. Ciao.